Welcome to Earworm episode 12. I'm Patrick Cloud.
I'm Bryan Clark.
Thanks for joining us today. It's very exciting. We have our third interview. A good friend, Doug Battle from Sony. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, when you said Bryan Clark, I started to say, I'm Doug Battle. But
no, it's perfect. And I'm Doug Battle, part of the Earworm family. But we really appreciate you being here. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about immersive music, because I think it's a really interesting topic that people really don't know a lot about yet. People in the industry obviously know about it, but I think it's one of those things. There's a lot of myths, so we'll try to talk about that. But we want to bring Doug in. Doug works for Sony's virtual mix environment program, and you've been there for how long have you been with Sony now?
2 years.
Close to 2 years. Yeah. And I've seen you in action. I've actually done the VME measurements. It's a really interesting thing, and I'll let Doug describe that later. But let's get a little bit of your origin story, right? I know that you went to Georgia University,
yeah,
right?
University of Georgia. Upon graduation, I was like a lot of college grads, trying to figure out where my life was headed. I definitely had ambitions in music and in pro audio my whole life. That was something I was even doing in college. I was kind of locally on campus. My claim to fame was I made a rap song with Sony Michel.
You want to give us a couple of bars?
No. But he was the big, star football player. Yeah. And we did a thing.
Sony's still in the league, right?
He's out. He's retired.
Oh,
now.
okay.
Yeah, it's weird when you're like the age of people that are retired, and you feel like you're.
I just started though.
Yeah, I'm like the young guy in my industry, and then it's people that I went to college with are retired, and I don't know what they do now, but. Yeah,
but you were doing a football podcast, right?
So when I finished school, I was working whatever job I could to pay the bills, pretty much, and I really treated it like, I know in Nashville a lot, you see a lot of artists that are waiting tables and doing whatever they have to do to keep the dream alive, and I was doing that. I just wasn't waiting tables. I was just working, kind of more corporate jobs. But during my lunch break, I would go home and I would record podcast episodes. It was remote. It wasn't like this. Mm-hmm. And it was pre-video podcast, so it was all audio. But yeah, I had some connections through Georgia football, so I had a lot of the former players. And
so what molded you from doing the podcast scene into what you started doing and basically being a really known engineer?
Yeah, good question. So I always was doing audio or music specifically prior to that. The podcasting was kind of a natural extension of my skill set, but it ultimately kind of opened the doors for me to produce, record, edit for other people, and I was doing that in Georgia, and during COVID, it all became remote, and so I had this opportunity to make some music in my spare time. I had a little home studio, not quite like this, no API, but not quite like this. But it was still very workable. And I made some music. Ended up getting an opportunity to go out to LA. I learned that there's a cost of living difference.
Did you go to LA blind, or did you have like a?
I'd been once. I actually had been for the Rose Bowl when Sony and Michel scored the game-winning touchdown.
Oh, nice.
Full circle there. But while I was out in LA, I was working night sessions a lot, like small time pop and hip hop guys coming in, tracking. I was doing a lot of the dirty work, tuning vocals. I mean, one note at one word at a time. I was extremely in the weeds, prepping sessions for guys. Just doing whatever I could to earn people's trust and get a foot in the door in the industry that I really wanted to be in. Because being from Alabama, it wasn't like there's not studios, there's not labels. Sony doesn't have offices in Alabama, so it felt like such a pipe dream for such a long time just to even work in music.
Well, I mean, obviously it takes a lot of bravery and a lot of courage to go out and just do this out of college young. How did you wind up working with like Eric Schilling and Herbert Waddle and all of these really like big time production people?
Yeah, and first off, I talked to Eric 2 days ago, and every time I talk to Eric, and every time his name comes up, I have to. And Herbert Waddle as well, particularly, incredibly grateful to have opportunities. And I talked to Eric about it, and I was thanking him, and he gave me a little bit of credit graciously. And Eric's just a complete gentleman if you ever have the pleasure of meeting him. But was saying, the reason that you got that opportunity wasn't just us, being generous. It wasn't a charity entirely. I think it was some, but
you're always going to feel that way,
yeah,
right?
I think it was some, but Eric said that the reason that it worked out for you was that you had prepared. Like you when you came in, they drilled me with like technical questions, and I didn't go to school for this. I went to school for other stuff. I was entirely self-educated. We were talking earlier about your videos, but mixed with the masters, a lot of YouTube. I would sit down at night, like after work, and just turn on the TV. I'd have my laptop out. I'd watch Mix with the Masters, and I would literally do every step that they were doing on my computer. I would save the presets, and I was just learning everything I could that way. But I was extremely prepared, and I think Eric recognized that, and Herbert, and they ultimately, started offloading a little bit of work to me. But in terms of how I even got the connection with those guys or Dave Way or anyone that I was kind of starting out getting my start with, it's kind of nuts. I had an opportunity to get an MBA for free. Like I had a scholarship to get an MBA when I moved out to LA, and those were my two options. And I actually chose going out to LA and passing on the school opportunity. The goal with an MBA is to position yourself for the job that you want. When I looked at the opportunities that the MBAs I knew were getting, they were in the big four accounting firms. Those weren't the places I wanted to be. I didn't view it as something that positioned me for the jobs I really wanted or the career I really wanted. Working in music, meeting the right people in Los Angeles, I actually thought would get me further toward my goals than getting an MBA. So, and about that time is when Dolby and Apple announced like the spatial audio for, Dolby Atmos for music kind of partnership. And I heard some buzz about it because in the studio scene, there were like one or two studios out there that were even equipped for that.
It was like 2019, 2020.
Yeah, about that time. And they were charging like crazy money for it, And so,
but it wasn't even creation though, right? They were just going back in catalogs, right?
Yeah, they were mixing catalog stuff. Yeah. But for me, the opportunity was twofold. One, it was like as more of an entrepreneur, seeing a financial opportunity, which, frankly, that's dried up quite a bit. And I think a lot of people in music experience that. Let's buy all these speakers and I'll be one of those 3 now in town. But when 200 people do that, obviously there's the equilibrium of supply and demand, changes quite a bit, or it gets out of equilibrium. So there's a little bit of a surplus now, I think. But with that said, really where I saw the opportunity was that it was the back catalog stuff. And it was like, this is an opportunity to, no one's going back and spending money to mix Atmos versions of unsuccessful projects from 30 years ago that no one ever heard of.
Right.
They're all Grammy-winning projects, for multi-platinum selling artists.
Right.
And so I was like, and I also felt like it was new enough. All the producers and engineers that I was working with at the time, this is pre-Eric, Dave, any of those guys, none of them knew what it was. And they were kind of like, should I? It's probably not worth my time to get into. And I just saw it as something like, okay, well, if I learn how to do this, there's clearly, I'd heard how much catalog stuff was going to need to be done. There's going to be a lot of work, and nobody knows how to do it. So I might not be as experienced as these guys, but it kind of levels the playing field for me where we're all starting from zero now instead of all these people. I'm jumping into this industry where I have this huge disadvantage of being years and years behind everyone. So I just decided to be that guy with Atmos, and I started spending a lot of time self-educating. So I went down, Dolby on their website had, and somebody's going to hate that I say this because I don't mean to blow up anyone's phone here, but Dolby on their website had a list of the different studios that were equipped for Atmos, and they had their contact on there. So I reached out to every single one. I reached out to every single one in Los Angeles. Didn't hear back from 90% of them. And just so happened that I did hear back from probably the top couple guys I would have wanted to hear back from. Got to give them their flowers. At first, it was Dave Way.
Dave Way, Station.
Way Station, awesome guy, awesome space. First project, I went up there, and it wasn't like, hey, can I have a job or anything like that. It was like, I'm learning about this stuff. I want to be a guy that helps people that are making this stuff. Would love to connect and pick your brain on this. Ultimately, my goal at that point was, first off, he's a good hang, and it was a good time. But I was also like trying to find pain points and see like, are these guys, do they have so much work coming their way that they're actually having to turn away work? And how could I help them do what they love doing and what they're great at by taking on some of the parts of the work that anyone could do,
Sure.
Useful idiot kind of thing.
Being the drum editor kind of thing, right?
So and Dave, like pretty much first time I met him, I probably picked up on that. And again, it was probably being generous too.
And that's a great way to look at it. Before we go further, I want to ask Bryan, so if you could explain Immersive a little bit, just kind of like a little bit of how it works to the audience, because maybe some people don't know. And then the other the question that I have for both of you is that going back into the catalog, if they re-release something in an Immersive situation, so they go back and remix a Queen record, does that satisfy a label's requirement for a new release from the band?
Wow, that's a loaded one.
It's two different questions, but I figured while I had them locked, I should probably put them out there.
Well, okay, so the history of the immersive audio really kind of comes from once we got off of mono. Stereo technology was around for a long time ago. This goes back to early sort of recording technology, where we start getting into early experiments that the English and the Americans were doing to try to see if they could find a wider sound field and particularly capture that on 78 recordings, which is great. So Alan Blumlein is probably the father of stereo, where that started to come from. And then we ended up getting into stereo forever and ever and ever and a day. And then we started to get into quad, which was cool. That was a left front, left rear, right rear. And they were individually decodable, so you could literally bounce sounds around,
right? But
it wasn't that. Then we did 5.1, right, which is sort of the early DVD kind of revolution that everybody was starting to get. And the big drawback, and you may be able to speak to this too, Doug, is that like the big drawback it isn't really the people who are making movies and making music. Like, it's not for us in the studios that can mix in this environment. We can do an Atmos mix, or we can do, a 360 mix, or we can do it in any kind of format that we want, or the sort of watered down version, the Apple Immersive, their version of Dolby, their version of Atmos. But like, and those are fine. Those are great. The big issue has always been, what does the consumer have access to? Because the technology's been around for decades. Yeah. And that's the problem, is that we're trying to do it. Now, in my estimation, so for those of you who don't know, Dolby came out with Atmos, and Atmos basically, in its most fleshed out state, and when I was at Blackbird, there's 2 rooms that were Atmos 9.1.6. So that is a tremendous amount of speakers that you are going to have. That's 6 up top, 9 around you, and the sub, which basically consolidates into 1, even though there were 4 subs up at the front. But we know bass frequencies are omnidirectional, so that's why it counts as a 1. But essentially, whatever you do, if it's a 714, it doesn't matter. That's the most common standard for Dolby. And then when you flipped one of the rooms around, particularly Studio C in Blackbird, it was a Sony equivalent, and that didn't go over too well with Dolby. By the way, they were a little pissed. So when that happened, you could literally spin 180 degrees and mix in Sony in the 360, but then you could go back and then do it. So I think the big problem is really how do we do it? Now, most people are not going to do it. There were some folks that did put Atmos in their cars, and some high-end luxury automakers are really exploring it. I think that is the new real frontier, barring...
consumption is mostly through when you're traveling, right? So headphones and in your car. Like, those like the main...
That's it, right. And so the one thing that I think Sony is immaculately doing really well, and by the way, I have to say that in general, Sony has always been... Typically, they've always been able to come out with a better technology. They've not been good at converting to make it a standard. We saw this with the Betamax and VHS. Beta was a far superior thing. It's happening now
with Sony too,
with the headphones, because when you get your ears mapped and you listen to it, you're going, holy crap, this is amazing, game changer. And I love that. And Atmos is like, we can't... I don't know. They can't even square that peg. You know what I mean? It's just it's hard for them. So I think that Sony is such a leader in that way, but that conversion rate to get it to the masses, and that's been the big thing. So whoever cracks this egg, and I think that Sony is the closest so far, at least that I know about. If they can crack that egg to where the next time that we go in and we buy whatever AirPod version we want, however the price point, and we get a sense of spatial audio just on the move, that's the winning ticket, because everything else will filter down into your car, and then Sonos will come on or whoever, and you'll start getting sound bars that are going to have projection speakers that are wireless that you can mount, you know what I mean? And then you get into the whole like prosumer Best Buy tier,
Sonos.
where people can actually go, you know what, for $500 I can put a 714 Atmos-ish type of experience in my home.
Yeah, I think, like as a consumer, my entry point to all of this, you touched on 5.1. My dad used to take me they used to have the Bose store in Birmingham. Like at the mall.
Cool.
And we would go, and my frugal father, who's a doctor, by the way, would not ever spend money on a consumer product. Like his whole life, I don't think he ever has.
Right.
But we would go into the Bose store, and we would go into their demo room and just sit down. And they would do their demo, and we did it like once a week for like years. And we'd put our name in a drawing to try to pull out. And but I always thought it was so, not to overuse the word immersive. It was so immersive. It was really a great experience for me. And
Well, that obviously shaped some of your future, right? Like that's so cool.
It was foundational in a sense, and I've always had that interest in it. So I mean, earlier I was talking about Atmos just from my pure selfish kind of business, looking for opportunity way. Mm-hmm. But creatively, when I was mixing or working on stuff, there was always this problem for me. Not even like one criticism I hear people say about Atmos specifically is they're like, oh, it's just stereo plus. It's just, and my defense to that's always been like, okay, so let's say it's stereo plus. Like stereo plus, like I would take stereo.
Pretty cool.
Because I used to be like, I used to always want stuff to be wider when I was mixing, and I'd buy all these plugins and try to like, defy physics to make it sound wider than it was and make this like phantom side almost. Yep. And then when I started working in Atmos, it's like, oh, you just put it there.
Exactly.
So again, I was pretty defensive of that format in particular, and Sony 360 as well. But with Dave, like what I was talking about earlier, with Dave, like first project, and again, I'm not mixing projects. I'm prepping sessions for Dave. Right. I'm doing whatever he wants me to do. But like first one, just give you an idea of like jumping from working on like, underground rappers to like first project was a 21 Pilots record that I was a big fan of in high school. And it's like, I'm now helping repurpose that, for Atmos, which was pretty exciting for me. Yeah. And so, but with that, Dave wasn't the only one. Ryan Ulyate, who's been nominated
Ryan's
for
such a cool
best,
such a sweet guy.
Best immersive album, the Grammy. His personal album, which is incredible, highly recommend. And I have
his Tom Petty mix is just
because he did the whole catalog for Tom Petty. For those of you that, and he just literally had me over, sat me in his studio. He's got these massive ATCs, and they're like pretty close to you. So you're like, I don't know how this is gonna go. And the room's like it opens to the outdoors, and it's in the Topanga Canyon area. So it's not like this perfect acoustic environment. And then he presses play on stuff, and it just blew my mind because feeling like the drummer's right there, and it feels so real, or it felt so real at that time. So, and he again was just being a friend. I didn't work with Ryan in any capacity, but it was just I was learning from everyone that I could. Eric and Herbert had me over when I had reached out, and again they kind of pressed me on some technical stuff, and it was pretty overwhelming for me at the time. I wasn't real experienced, and I was honest about that. And I think that they appreciated that. If there was something I didn't know, I would just tell them and say, "Hey, I'm a quick learner. I'd love to learn this from you."
They get to teach you the way that they want it done too. So there's no undoing anything that you've previously learned to be able to work within their workflow.
Right. Yeah. And so I started assisting, like it almost started with shadowing a little bit. Like it was kind of a Mr. Miyagi thing. I always tell people this with Eric, because I'm here. I like mixing. I watch Mix with the Masters. And on Mix with the Masters, they're like, here's this cool plugin, and you do this to get this effect. So I'm like, this is gonna be great. We're gonna do this. And like the first week, I go in with Eric, and he's like, all right, today we're gonna recable the desk. Today we're gonna, and we spent like a week or two just going through the room, him teaching me about converters and stuff. I didn't know anything about any of the gear. I was just one of those guys that's like, just have it set up for me and I can push the buttons and do the fun stuff. And that was really foundational for me, especially like later having the career more on the pro audio sales side and what I do now, like understanding the systems. And again, it was completely foreign to me at the time. And I was way out of my depth there. But Eric did a tremendous job understanding that and understanding that what I wanted to do wasn't what was going to best help me right out the gate. But as that process evolved, started prepping some of the Alicia stuff. He did her whole catalog, Alicia Keys. And by the time, there was projects here and there, but the first project I was like truly assisting on in the sense of actually having any kind of impact on the actual song beyond just prepping it and making life easy for people was the God of War Ragnarok for PS5.
And that won all kinds of awards, right? Like,
gosh, I lose track of it. It was nominated for Best Immersive Album for the Grammys. It was
for the
nominated,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But and then later co-mixed. We kind of split songs for Police Beyond Borders or split responsibilities with Stuart Copeland.
That's the
and
world
Ricky
out.
Cage.
The world,
Yeah.
his world album. Yeah.
But all that to say, when we were working on about the time we were working on God of War Ragnarok, the Sony guys I was introduced to, obviously we were working on a project for them. They were the client, and I was driving from North Hollywood, where I lived, with my buddy Logan Schroyer from This Is Us. Like, little shout out to Logan.
Right.
But I was living there, and I was going to Palos Verdes to work on these songs. And sometimes I was, because again, I was still working. I was working with you at one point.
Yeah.
And during the day, my hours are booked. But, once I'm off the clock, I'm still working my music stuff. Like, I was hustling just to try to get to where I could do that all the time, basically. And at that time, at least at the time, that was where my head was at, and yeah, it was a lot of hours.
What's that commute like?
Yeah, it was a lot of hours.
What's the commute from North?
I mean, it depends.
North
but
Hollywood to Palos Verdes.
45 minutes
easily
without traffic, but
Yeah.
I mean, it could easily be 2 hours at the wrong time, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I was spending a lot of time in the car, going to the studio, and then I would spend there were days where I spent more time in the car than at the studio because I'm going to prep songs or I'm going to tweak mixes or to do really little things. And it was not efficient for me. And Eric and Herbert were like, hey, you should come. The Sony guys are coming. They're showing us their new tool or whatever. So they showed me, they demoed for Herbert and then Eric and then me for 360 VME. We're working in 360 RA. People always get that confused. 360 RA is a format.
Right.
360 VME is a tool that's format agnostic. And the tool that was format agnostic, and at the time I don't know that it was format agnostic. We were just working in 360 RA with it. But basically, and I watched Eric Schilling like right before me, who was, I hold him like at such a high view.
Yeah.
And his ears and his judgment on speakers and everything. Like almost every piece of gear that I've bought is something that he would recommend or that he really swore by, or at least a brand. And so Eric, watching him do this test where they put these microphones in his ears, they play a couple tones through all the speakers, they put some headphones on him, and then they play some stuff, and he's like, it's not coming out of the headphones. Like, it's coming out of the speakers. And they're like, no, it's like, that's good. Like,
that's when I tried it the first time. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, and I was like, what? Yeah, same thing. You watch someone else do it, and you're like, nah. And then you put it on, and you're flipping. But for me, I was like looking around. I'm like, I know how much this room costs. I know how I could never attain this myself. Like, especially at that point in life. And also clicked immediately that I can start doing a lot of this work from home. Obviously, I'm going to tweak it in the studio. Obviously, I'm going to collaborate with them in the studio. But it's really solved a problem for me. And so naturally, I became just an honest kind of ambassador of that solution because I was telling everybody. I was like, this is unbelievable. Like any room, we can do it in here on these PMCs. I can take this home with me. And if we were working on a project and you could trust that I was hearing kind of what you're hearing, and I could bring it in here. And even now, we could through audio movers, we could live stream and stuff. Like we could collaborate in real time.
Yeah. Sure.
I became a natural ambassador of that just organically.
Right on. Well, I want to talk more about VME in a minute, but I kind of want to give the listener kind of the state of the industry, like where we are with Dolby and with Immersive, and what are, I guess the question would be is, and you would know as well, Bryan, is what are like the deliverables for a studio when they're submitting to a record label with a product? Like, what are the things that they have to submit now as opposed to, a stereo mix that was like, here's the record, it's done.
Yeah. It's changed a bit. I mean, I think it's probably going to be a little bit of like, it depends on who you're working with, and of course the genre and whatever, and what the content is. Like, obviously, if it's any way related to TV or film or to video games, you've got a whole different checklist than you do if it's just going to be a standard rock album release. But that being said, more often than not, I kind of start seeing like some people are requesting stems. In addition to immersive, you have to have immersive mix.
And can you explain real quick off the side, what's a stem?
So a stem is basically like, just to put it plain and simple, let's say you have 24 tracks in this song, right? So you got bass, drums, guitars, BGVs, horns, whatever, right? And then of course the drums take up 90% of that. I'm kidding, but you have multi-track drums and then everything. Okay, well, so some people are like, hey, look, we just need a stem for the entire mix minus the vocals, because maybe they're going to want to use that as a talk show thing where the singer's going to go on and do some karaoke version of a Today Show or Good Morning USA or whatever, and then you'll have different versions of that. Right.
Okay. So the stems really allow for promotional material.
Yeah, or like maybe
remixes.
Yeah, or like it happens sometimes too where you're on the road and like maybe you have ancillary instruments, not core part of the band, but because of this project, like maybe it was a 21 Pilots kind of thing, but they had a horn section, but the horn section got delayed, or they got COVID or something like that, and you're like, oh shit. We actually are going to need a horn section, so you have a stem,
and then you time code the stems.
So it's a saver for that. Also helps folks like Doug when they go in to a project and you're prepping it. If you have the stems, if you have, because sometimes, at least when I would see it and when we would mix it at Blackbird in Atmos, same kind of thing would happen where we wouldn't necessarily have the original multi-tracks because that would have been transferred from tape. And some of the studios were too cheap to do that. They were like, look, we just need the stems. And then they would basically give us a stem. We'd digitize it and stuff like that. So it's really helpful for immersive mixing. That's what the stems are for. But most of the time when you're delivering, to answer your question fully, you're going to deliver it to Apple or whatever. You're going to have an immersive mix, then you're going to have a traditional stereo mix, and then any other.
So yeah, the file, like, typically the most common file for the immersive is that ADM file.
Yeah.
That said, there's a number of formats now, like popping up all over the place. I mean, Apple has IAMF, which is currently more geared toward the VR space, I think, but it totally has the potential for the whole music content. Obviously, Sony 360's got its own deliverables, and I was intimately familiar with that working with Eric and Herbert, which by the way, I didn't give Herbert enough. Herbert was like I describe him as immersive producer, and these guys have won multiple Grammys for this. Like they're the best in class with.
Would you say he's like a Yoda?
Yeah, no.
Did you hear that?
Star Wars reference there. He was like the Ben Kenobi, I'd say. And I was like Luke kind of thing, but he a lot of wisdom there, but he was philosophical about it. Like he wasn't a mixer. He's a musician. Like he's a classical pianist. But he and Eric had worked on, you mentioned like Quad 5.1. They'd been working in immersive audio for 20 years, before Atmos for music was a thing. So they had this huge head start on everyone. And then they were working together. So you had this world-class mixer with this world-class musician who's also, like when I'm working on something more classical and I'm putting stuff where it sounds good, he's saying, no, the oboe doesn't go there. That's not where it would go if we were in a chamber or something and doing this in whatever century where they would have musicians up in the balcony and all around you, and that's how we want this to sound. Like he was extremely philosophical, and the product of their work always translated to, this isn't just up-mixing a track to meet a deliverable, which a lot of people do, unfortunately. Like a lot of
they mix it in stereo, you mean, and then
there's nothing wrong with mixing it in stereo and then mixing it in another format, but a lot of people are just like, they just want a deliverable, they don't care how it sounds, versus how do we take full advantage of all that's accessible to us?
That's a great question.
And that's what Herbert, like, that is his, like, he's looking for every opportunity to take full advantage of the format without overdoing it, without it being gimmicky.
Right, because at inception it was to remix old product. Yeah. Rocket Man, all these big songs, all these big records. But then it started getting to the point where there's like a transition point where it's like, okay, we're going to use it as a creative process now. So that changes the engineer's influence on mic placement, all of the different things that are considered when you're building out a mix, right?
And we do, like, I'm still involved in not pioneering that, but definitely with people who are, like, Will Chasen's a guy who, we do this thing at Sony called Immersive Creator Experience every year, and it's out in Topanga, actually kind of close to Ryan.
Okay.
And basically rent out this property. We build makeshift pop-up immersive studios. I think we had like 7 last year.
That's cool.
And again, Will Chasen, he's got this company that pops up studios, does kind of, I don't know, they're a huge help for the Sony guys because our bandwidth is we can only set up so many studios in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have everyone just experimenting with, it's like a camp. It's like an artist camp, but you have a whole week to just make stuff together and collaborate with different people. But it's all immersive, and it's immersive from the ground up. So the recording is immersive, whether that's an ambisonic microphone or putting 12 different microphones in the room. Everyone's finding different techniques, and again, trying to pioneer. And obviously, there's guys outside of that camp that are doing that as well. But really exploring, I guess I learned to value that through Herbert because it was almost like a religious insult. Like if he heard of people talking about, just slap it on there and put a reverb on it and call it a day. He took that real personally. Like this is an art form, and we have more available to us. Why in the world would we not take advantage of that, or would we make light of that and do less with it than we could? There's a real reverence for what's possible in immersive that I developed under Herbert's tutelage in combination with Eric. And again, there's a reason that they've had the success that they've had with
Sure.
records.
So I was thinking about just the engineers and producers that have been doing it for a long time that were very adverse to lossless immersive, and you're probably still see it in the industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and
I think they should be. I don't think they should be discounted. Their opinions. I think that they have some very, very valuable.
Well, they've suffered through from the historical timeline of all of these immersive formats that came,
and
they got excited about,
failed.
and they failed.
Right.
So it's sort of like, okay, we're going to get burned again. But
I shell shocked in a way.
Yeah, and we would have. I mean, I still have debates about this, with other engineers even around town, and we're talking about it. And there's some people that are very pro stereo and don't believe that Atmos is going to make it. And I'm like, I'm totally the opposite. I'm like, I don't really care what the format's concerned, what we name it and who has the proprietary IP on it. But what I'm more concerned about is that we move away from stereo and we start getting into an immersive field. Because when you get into like what can make a transducer, what can make a speaker, and we start getting into like really cutting edge technology, dude, you can mount speakers and make speakers out of anything. So like one of the projects we used to do is, make a speaker out of a paper plate. And for those of you guys who might be DIY folks, go Google that on the internet and you'll find out how you can do it. And you can turn a little cheesy paper plate on, like on the 4th of July, into an actual diaphragm and actually replicate sound out of it.
Wow.
So it's possible. But I think that for the most part, at least as far as I'm concerned, I'm a firm believer in it and moving past stereo. I mean, we need to.
The entrepreneur in me thought those people were not thinking because of just, again, seeing the opportunity that was like guaranteed. It wasn't like gamble. Like we knew for a fact how many millions of songs were going to have to be mixed and how few people had the skill set to do that. And it was just like, if you're looking for opportunity, this is a no-brainer.
Right.
So that was kind of my mindset going in. As a creative, I'm like Herbert in the sense, so I'm like, I don't want to work with less when I can work with more.
Yeah.
I have these new creative possibilities, and I've heard some mixes that just, I've heard songs come to life in new ways. I mean, it's truly creatively so fulfilling to have that space to work with, regardless of format. I mentioned, and Eclipse is another one that's you're seeing deliverables when we were talking about deliverables earlier. For YouTube and for, I guess, the Samsung and Google products, but at least for the time being. But nonetheless, across formats, there was a new dimension available to music makers. That's a lot of fun. Now, where I empathize the most with the critics, the late adopters or the non-adopters,
right?
Is, what they'll say is no one's going to hear this. Like, no one is experiencing this the way I experienced it in my studio. And so that's where, first off, hats off to Dolby for what they've done with, say, you mentioned the vehicles earlier. There's quite a few vehicles popping up with systems. And if you get to sit in them, it's quite impressive. And it's not, I don't think it's too far-fetched to imagine a day where that's the standard car system. Like, and I think Dolby's probably on pace for that. Not just the high-end. You start with the high-end, but I mean, I think it's trickling down.
Yeah, I agree.
And then obviously home theater. I think you have the Sonos system.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff out there. But again, that's not for everyone, and not everyone's going to have the means for that. The headphone stuff is you mentioned like cracking the code. Everyone's working toward that. Like, I know for a fact. Like I bet my bottom dollar. Like, it's very important to Apple. It's very important, obviously, to Sony. It's very important to Dolby, and they've had some recent developments there, and that's like an area where I really pay close attention, partially because of my work, but partially because, again, for me, it opened up, like VME, when I was working as a professional, it opened up, like, I go have my own business now. Like, I don't have to be at the studio. I can save more time. Now it solves a problem for me where I live in an apartment complex. I have monitors. Like, I have Neumann monitors. And I don't play them loud at night because I don't want to be a jerk to people around me. Yeah. And I've measured myself in that space, and I'll turn them off, and I'll work on headphones, and it's like I'm still hearing my speakers in that space. Like, there's a number of different. There's QC things. There's a lot of post-production application, big dubbing stages, which if you ever have a chance to do a VME measurement there and watch a Apple TV movie at home, as if you're in basically a movie theater, it's unbelievable.
Well, I tell you, the best Dolby experience I've ever had was at the recording studio in Walmart. So
the recording studio at Walmart. And
did you know?
I heard about this.
We did an episode, kind of part of an episode about it. There's there is a Dolby room. In the Walmart?
What speakers? I'm guessing IK.
They're Atom.
Atom. Okay.
Yeah, but just the small.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, so is it 714?
It's 714.
It's 714. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it's $70 or it's $100 an hour to go and QC your mix or whatever. Nice. But anyway, before we get into VME a little bit more, because I do want to talk about that, because this is kind of like the root of the show today. For listeners that haven't truly experienced a mix of their favorite song that has been redone in Dolby or in Immersive, figure out a way to hear it, because you're going to hear the song, like Doug said. It's like hearing it again and hearing things that you never knew were in the song before. I recently listened to Dark Side of the Moon.
One caveat of that is contingent on the mix. If it's
right. Well, yeah, and we'll get to that, because there have been some really awful mixes. We're not going to name them, but there are some songs that you'll go back and be like, okay, we didn't need to hear this.
Yeah.
But one example that was really well done is Dark Side of the Moon was done for the anniversary of the album last year, and I'm privileged enough to have a DVD of the Dolby mix, and I translated on my PS5, and it goes out through my Sonos system, and that's not even this is a virtual version of listening to those things, but it's unbelievable. I have heard that record 1,000 times, and that 1,001 time that I heard it, it was like hearing it for the first time all over again.
I think that it unloads the burden that most mix engineers have to deal with, which is that when we're mixing, especially in stereo, you've got issues with masking, right? And you're always trying to EQ for a stereo mix. And as soon as you are able to literally put something out in space, you can have a much more fully detailed version of each individual instrument, and they don't cancel each other out. Yeah. And I think that, to me, when we first started, because I was kind of like you, Doug, like when Atmos came out, I was like, okay, what is this? And then I'm like, well, I'm going to go and get trained on it and just see what I can do. And so I did the whole kind of thing. And what I would do on my off time, I would go into Studio C at Blackbird, and I would pull up multi-track stems that I had, and I would mix Tom Sawyer Rush, but I'd put Neil Peart on the ceiling, just because I wanted to see how far can I actually push the envelope and make it seem right. And of course, you stop looking for EQs. You're just like, wait, I don't have to EQ anything.
Carving out.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do. Spend a lot of time carving out frequencies. And a lot of that stuff, it's like, you don't really hear it, and it's buried with that. But you're taking like a very natural sound in making it sounds so digital to me when it's like carved up like that. You know, you're only hearing certain frequencies of an instrument.
Yeah.
And I had that same like realization of feeling like, okay, I can take off a lot of these EQs and I can hear the full breadth of each of these instruments in their rightful place. And I can give them a place to sit too where they can be audible without taking over the vocal, you know, and they're not fighting for that very limited space up front. So it creatively, again, it's very fulfilling and satisfying to work on. And as a consumer, again, there's limited ways right now to consume. I think that technology is advancing. One of my aims with my work is to be one person that's pushing toward that, you know, within a much larger company and with a much larger industry.
Well, let's talk about that work. Let's talk about VME and like what it's doing, where it's come from just when you started 2 years ago, where it is now, and then what the future looks like for consuming that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's relatively slow development if you view it as it started in 2022 or whenever that was. But the technology has been in the works 20 plus years. Our good friends over in Tokyo, R&D guys, are the masterminds behind what we do. A lot of people, when I present it to them, they look at me like I created it or, you know, give me some credit. I'm just like, it's not.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, these guys are a whole
Shout out to
level,
Hero.
you know, PhD level mathematicians, you know, doing magic tricks with sound, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What they do. I call it an auditory illusion, but that's how I describe it to people. It's like you're under this illusion that things are coming from places, or in reality, they're coming out of a speaker that's, you know, a quarter inch from your ear.
To guide him through, because I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a handful of people who are like, okay, what does it mean? Step one, what do we do? Average guy in off the street wants to have the process.
Good call,
what do you do?
Measures. You've got to be in the space. So if we're like your studio, we should have brought it. Honestly, we could have just done this on the podcast. But yeah, you know, got to be in the space that you want to hear. So we're there. 2 microphones. They're condensers. You could track a vocal on them. Don't know how that would turn out, but they go inside your ear though. They're like borderline microscopic. In your ear, pink noise. In this case, stereo room, 2 speakers, sweep tones, both speakers, headphones on, sweep tones, and then pink noise, and you're going to hear it from the speakers, but it's coming from your headphones. So, and then from that point, I'm able to put on music and have you know, again, sometimes we'll do it different ways. So sometimes I'll have them think that it might come out of the speakers, that, you know, and they're sitting there like, yeah, it's not coming out of the headphones. And you're like, it's not coming out of the speakers. It is coming out of the headphones. But again, they have that auditory illusion, and you can solo speakers.
And it is disorienting. At first, as a kid, like when I did it, it was like kind of like knocked me off a little bit because it was very unusual.
Get tripped up. So of course, like this is not a scalable solution. Like you were talking about consumers earlier. This isn't something. You know, some people will be like, "Oh, why don't they put one of these in every Best Buy or whatever?" But you know, it's. I don't think that that's the direction it's going.
That's not what it's not for.
No, this is for professionals that have a space like this that they've invested a lot of money in, or someone like me that's a professional that's working out of a space that needs access to it, even when someone's using it.
Right.
To be able to access that specific space. But the underlying technology, which again has been in the works for much longer than this has been available, it became available by necessity during COVID for Sony Pictures because they had to leave the lots. They measured themselves in there, left the lots, and then came back at the end and they were like, holy smokes, I worked on this in my living room and I'm hearing it on this big dub stage and I'm making very little tweaks.
Right. It sounds
like,
right.
That solves a problem for us. We can start doing more projects in here and people, you know, as a workflow thing. But and then music, you know, Atmos music stuff started popping up around then in Sony 360 format. So it just kind of became what it is by necessity, but it's still evolving. The underlying technology, which isn't a mystery, I don't think, because I've even presented on it in front of a bunch of people in the different companies in our industry. Like it's not a mystery what's going on there as far as the technical challenges of creating that auditory illusion. I think the mystery, or at least what everyone's working toward, is how do you scale that? Because it's so specific to each person's ears, to each room. Yeah. How do you scale that so that the consumer can hear on their headphones this and share this experience that we're getting? And I'm a believer, since really I heard VME for the first time and experienced true immersive on headphones, I was like, okay, this immersive stuff is, people are it's a matter of time before people value it, because once you hear it correctly, and clearly that we're taking steps toward that at a consumer level, that it really offers a different experience and something fundamentally new and exciting for music listeners.
Well, you mentioned as a commodity. Sorry, Brian. You mentioned as a commodity. Is there a world that we're looking forward to that the stereo mix is available on Apple Music, and then you have to buy the immersive version? As long as there's something that decodes it at a consumer level appropriately, right?
Like Ryan Olyate's project that he self-released, self-produced, and ended up getting a Grammy nomination for. He used, I think it's like immersivemusic.com. But it's for sale. Like the files are for sale. So you totally could do that. As far as how the ecosystem looks, and that's another legitimate question that people have about immersive is, okay, so now I'm getting paid the same amount to do 2 mixes, or am I getting paid more?
If it's a budget
issue. There's legitimate questions. So again, the detractors of Atmos 360, whatever it is, I never want to dismiss, because it's extremely helpful to have those perspectives and to start trying to solve those problems.
Right.
Let me tell you what you do. This is the way I would I'm going to crack this nut. Here's what you do. You go to a place, could be a Walmart.
Like a Walmart.
But basically you go in, you have sort of a VME scenario set up, okay? Where you are in a room that is of an average size, say like a person's living room or whatever, right? In this place, okay, because I think people would still be able to get the immersive experience even if you shot the impulse functions in a room that wasn't their own, right? I mean, we have that all the time when we go to a theater, right? Sure. It's not your theater. So, okay, you do this, you do everything in the room, and then you save the profile in a database, and then you link that database with point of contact of sale from whatever it is, whether it's a download or whatever. And then when someone downloads it, you upload your profile for a fee to whatever your DSP is, whether it's Spotify or Apple or whatever, and that's your profile. And then anything that you get, you have a choice between regular download or regular listening opportunity. But then when you hit immersive, it's your profile that's being broadcast to you. And that's the thing.
There's the way. That's an interesting...
Hey, send me the millions, guys. I'm just telling you. But on this thing, because I thought a lot about this, here's the thing. And for those of you who don't know how the inner ear works, let me just say this just real quick without getting technical. But we are, the way that the human ear has evolved, we're really good at localization cues left and right, lateral. We're less so about height. We don't have a very accurate deception or a reception of how high something is. We might go, that's 10 feet. It could be 25.
Sure.
We don't know. But if someone's 5 feet to the right, you definitely know. So if you don't want to try this, don't do this when you're in a moving vehicle, folks. But try this if you are next time you're stationary, walk outside. And just close your eyes, take the tops of your ears and fold them down just like this, and keep your eyes closed because you don't want to listen with your eyes, and do this and wait till something high overhead passes. It could be a helicopter, it could be a jet plane, it could be whatever. And you'll go, wow, my depth perception is not nearly as deep. This is the cool part about the VME thing, and what Sony spent so much time in is that they've researched this very, very well, but a tremendous amount of our frequency. If you go to your mirror and look at your right ear, and then look at your left ear. They're not the same. They're literally like fingerprints. They're totally different, even on the same human being. Everybody has it, and our brain automatically knows what it is, but nobody's ear is shaped the same. Everybody's got, a little bit of extra cartilage here, more folds there, whatever. And so that's the nut that everybody has to crack, because until you get your profile of what your ears are, because they're basically acting as, for a crude term, an EQ. Once you get your EQ curve, you will not have a full immersive experience because it's just an approximation of it. So I think
if I listen to yours, it might sound like I'm listening through a telephone or something. Like it can be extremely drastic from one person to the next. Even the most minor. You wear glasses.
Yeah.
You got a better beard than I do.
Just lazy. I'm just lazy.
Yeah. I wear a hat, and it's.
So when you have different people with different profiles doing these mixes on VME or whatever, how does that affect the product? for the consumer.
It sounds the same as if those people were in the room, or I mean, as close to the same as you could possibly be. There's certain things, like I always tell people, you're not going to feel the air hit your chest.
Right.
There's certain advantages to being in a room, and I don't think Sony's position has ever been to replace a studio. You know, like you were at Blackbird, and we would never be like, hey, you don't have to rent out Blackbird anymore. You can use VME. You know, it's like this is for guys at Blackbird,
right?
That their room's booked and they need to be working on something, or you know, it's like that kind of use case. Like it's a supplementary solution. Obviously, for a consumer, if there were a technology. And again, I'm not at liberty to like share any kind of developments there.
Sure.
But if there were a technology that allowed for that, I know that everyone's trying. I know that Apple has their own version. I actually am not as critical as a lot of people are of that. I talked to Kerry Thomas about this not too long ago, but I was talking to him about soloing speakers, and because I do it in the different versions of it, I like to really compare things. And you know, he was saying, look, if you put a shoebox up where that speaker's supposed to be, like there is a there's a psychoacoustic effect. And when you're just listening in earbuds or headphones and you have no context for where things like should be coming from, it's a different experience for people. So I think there's a huge challenge on the consumer side.
Yeah.
That we have a huge advantage of when we measure people, they're in the room, they're seeing, okay, it should sound like it's coming from here. And that's exactly what it sounds like.
Right.
When you're at home, you're listening to all the speakers at once, and you have no idea that there even should be multiple speakers. It's hard, and then it's not A being between stereo. There's no point of contrast like that, and so it's very difficult for people to perceive any difference in that way. So that is one of the big challenges with VME. Again, a legitimate concern that a lot of people are working to address.
Right on.
I think as technology gets cheaper and better and faster, this nut is going to get cracked. It's an inevitability. It's going to happen.
Right.
You know.
Well, okay. So Doug, thank you for being here to talk about Immersive. But wait, I got one more topic, and I just want to throw it out there because we're chatting. What is your take on AI and where AI is fitting into music creation, production? Because Bryan and I've talked about AI quite a bit. We've actually fought with some of our audience a little bit. There's a lot of opinions on it, and there's a way to differentiate it, I think, between it being just a dump, right, or a graveyard, or just like a trash heap, right, of slop, versus using it as something that is actually a productive tool. So, do you have any experience with AI in music, and like, what's kind of your take?
Yeah, I'm pretty in the weeds on the AI stuff, not for music, like for daily tasks.
Well, sure, I use it as my,
and we're one area that I don't feel like it's talked about enough, because it's almost like I've seen someone kind of parody it and be like, oh, we made an AI that'll play your video games for you. Like a lot of people feel that way about music AI. They feel like, oh, I don't want it to do the thing that I do for fun for me. I want to make music. So I always tell those people, I'm like, look, have it plan your release dates, and have it do the mechanical things. I think that most artists, and I've had roommates in LA and stuff. I've lived with several artists that spend more time managing their social media than making music. And I'm like, what a great opportunity. We should not be poo-pooing AI right now. This is giving you an opportunity to do the thing you want to do, and it can help scale the things that take a lot of your time. So that's my first initial impression on AI, is that if you even left all this alone, like if you keep this for you, it still helps you, because it's your finances and your accounting and your scheduling and all these things. Like it can be your manager. It can be like, there's so many ways to use it if you're smart about it. And so I always tell artists that. I'm always like, dude, you don't complain about this. Like you've got so much at your fingertips right now. You can have a whole team as an independent artist if you play your cards right here. So that's like my initial read on AI, and I really look for opportunities, or will look for opportunities, to equip artists and producers, engineers to leverage it to, again, to keep making human art. But with that said, obviously a lot of the buzz is around obviously there's stem separation, there's stem generation, there's a number of tools. There's tools for detecting whether your stuff's being used by someone else, even if it's not through AI. If you're just detecting plagiarism, essentially. There's all kinds of applications for it. I really liked at a very basic level, like I think Luna has the just track. It'll name your tracks. It'll color them. I mean, some of the stuff I used to do for other people, frankly, to get a foot in the door. But at the same time, that younger version of me is that much further ahead in terms of being able to either accomplish a lot in a short time or basically have my own assistant, that's doing that stuff for me so that I can work fast and so I can work at a higher level. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities all in all. I'm not one that's like on the sky is falling, this is going to take all of our jobs. I think I'm a big believer in not having a victim mentality about anything. And I think the people that look at it and find the opportunity in it are going to capitalize on it, and they're going to make more money. They're going to have more work. They're going to have, and I think the people that decide to fall victim to it, unfortunately, may have a negative experience in regards to AI. I really think we can make of it what we want to as creators, as business people in this industry.
It's a great take on it, and I just think that you kind of made a interesting comment about the things that you were doing to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
You can have AI do now.
Yeah.
So you would have, if the tools were available now, you would have walked into the situation with Eric and Herbert differently because you would have had more of a mastery of getting those things done by using AI.
There's two ways of looking at it. Like on the one hand, you're like, oh, where do those entry jobs go? Like and that's a concern. Where do people that are coming out of college go? At the same time, though, I'm like, man, I wish this had been around when I was 16, 17, 18. I was working so hard at that age. Like I was working so many hours. If I had had the tools at my fingertips now that people do, like I don't know that I would have worked for someone else or that I would have wanted to. Like I feel like I could have. You have so much available to you to build your own thing now, and I think that it will look different. I think that the rote work across industries is going to be reduced, and that whole useful idiot thing I brought up earlier, which someone taught me, like a mentor taught me that when I was younger and I was trying to find work. They're like, be a useful idiot. Like just be the guy that people can count on to just do whatever they need that makes life easier for them. And that's how I would always get my foot in the door for things. I don't know I think that Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini can be your useful idiot now for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So you have to find other ways to add value, and those things are all your useful idiot too, though. Like you have this assistant that you can use to accelerate your output. If you're, and again, I like prior to working in music, I was managing social media for people. I had a number of different kind of avenues of making money as my waiting tables, and those things now, like I could do 100 times as much work with doing that. Right. Paying the bills. I mean, you can create passive income so that you can just make music if you're really smart about it. So again, it's just like I think if you have a victim mentality, you're always going to fall victim to it. And if you're creative, if you're looking for solutions, you're going to find ways to make your life easier, to make your career accelerate. It's not going to look how your mom and dad's did, just like mine doesn't look how it's a very different world for me than what they inherited. It'll be the same for my kids one day. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you got to evolve and adapt.
That's a really great mentality to have towards it. I always think of anybody that's criticizing it, it's like, all right, do you have a car? Yeah. Man, you really destroyed the horse farming industry.
Yeah, I mean, and there's again, just like with Atmos, there's legitimate critiques. There's people have critiques about sustainability that are you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, this could be a problem. There's certain things that I am empathetic to, so I'm not just like all in that way. But from a pure opportunity standpoint, I do think that it will take certain opportunities. I also think that it makes a lot of different opportunities for people, and the people that choose to take advantage of those are people that are going to have the most success with in relation to AI. So,
did you have anything to plug?
Oh man, no. I really appreciate you guys having me on, Patrick. Our relationship dates back. I actually worked for Patrick at one point, and I'll plug Patrick because Patrick, just somebody that cares about the people that works for him, and at the same time is effective at when there's adversity and when there's things that are unfair or that are challenging, rather than creating a negative environment, attacking those problems. And that's something that I've carried with me outside of GC, and that I really appreciate Patrick and his leadership in those days, and just like I mentioned Eric earlier, and the people I've worked with over the years. But awesome to be invited to be a part of this and to keep it going. And yeah, really, really just thankful for you, Patrick, and all that you did to, make sure that my career was on the right track at one point, and happy to return the favor however I can. So,
right on.
Yeah.
Hey, Doug, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for being
Sony
here.
VME, really cool stuff. If you don't know anything about it, go check it out. If you get to go to an event where they're doing measurements, just go do it. It'll blow your mind. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, all of the shenanigans.
Yeah.
Earworm out.
Earworm out.
Cool.
Awesome.
Right on, man.
Dude, thanks, Doug.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, brother. That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick was there for me when I was like hardly able to work. So
You had a rough patch, dude.
Yeah, rough time there. So I appreciate it, but then creating a negative environment, attacking those problems, and that's something that I've carried with me outside of GC, and that I really appreciate Patrick and his leadership in those days, and just like I mentioned Eric earlier, and the people I've worked with over the years, but awesome to be invited to be a part of this and to keep it going, and really just thankful for you, Patrick, and all that you did to make sure that my career was on the right track at one point, and happy to return the favor however I can. So,
right on. Hey, Doug, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for being
Sony VME, really cool stuff. If you don't know anything about it, go check it out. If you get to go to an event where they're doing measurements, just go do it. It'll blow your mind. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, all of the shenanigans.
Yeah.
Earworm out.
Earworm out.
Did you hear that?